Hey everybody, I'm Bob Bakert with Jazz Guitar Today, and we're here with LD Meola.
How you doing there?
It's great to have you here. Thank you very much for doing this. I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure, man.
Obviously, me along with millions of other people, got hip to you very early on when you signed on with Chick, and I know that story's been around for a long time. But I wanted to go through a couple things, and I really want to talk about your tour because you're coming to Atlanta on the 27th. You're going to be here. I want to talk about your tour quite a bit, and
Right.
you brought so much to the electric guitar specifically and the acoustic guitar as well. There was nothing like you when you hit the scene. I don't know if anybody's ever told you that before.
Yeah.
I
I
know
really.
because I was in this, I was doing it at the time, playing and all of a sudden, this guy named LD Meola shows up and what the you brought, speed and accuracy. You weren't playing pentatonic scales, over blues and rock and jazz, like Clapton, Hendrix, and that kind of thing. You
Yeah, I
brought
was using my pinky as well, which they were only using the first and third finger and sometimes second.
and Latin complex rhythms. No one had ever heard that with an electric overdriven Marshall Les Paul. And then electric guitar and a truly more traditional jazz ensemble with Chick's composition. I mean, no one had done that, not that way.
No, I think Return to Forever was important in so much that Chick Corea was not only a phenomenal, one of the top players in his field, just as an improviser and just an incredible player all the way around. So his vocabulary was really thick, you know. The main thing about Chick was he also was a great composer. So we were one of the three bands that spearheaded a new movement, either called jazz rock or fusion. We were the most, I would say, compositional of the three bands. My vision was far more exciting. Well, they were exciting at the same time that they were more of a jam band. There wasn't a lot of composition going on. With Chick stuff, there was a lot of composition, and a lot of it was a big influence on how I continued with the idiom.
Yeah, and you're playing in that more in compositions. You're the first one that I ever saw playing electric overdriven guitar. I mean, that was like that. Nobody had done that, that I recall. I mean, John's thing was very, very different, wide open, high, high, high energy,
Yeah,
different thing. But this was more, this was a blend, truly, which is really cool. You also, the other thing you did, and then we'll lighten up in a minute, I promise you, but you made it cool to be a rock guitar player, if you will, and be able to read music.
I didn't think about that. Right. Well, I started very young, and I started with I was lucky to have been appointed this great teacher who was very well versed in jazz and was a great reader and had me playing scales in all the positions and alternate picking. So from 9 years old, I was really assigned the best teacher I could possibly get, in my local music store. So he was my first big influence, as a little kid, as well as learning jazz standards and all the chord stuff, substitutions that go along with it. I was also into the music of the day, the pop music of the day, and so was he. Even though he was a big Kenny Burrell and Barney Kessel and Johnny Smith fan, more of an older school jazz, guy that was influenced by that style. But somehow I got some of that, and he was also appreciative of some of the more beautiful Beatles songs that we played. His name was Bob Aslanian, and we were friends all through. Well, he was he continued to teach, but he was very proud because he had, I was. He can name me as one of his students, and so he was very proud of that.
Yeah,
And
sure.
then during 2020, he got COVID and passed away. As years went on, I had some years of lessons, and then I had some years of just going into New York and absorbing a lot of the music that was available each night of the week. And a lot of times I wound up, as a young teenager, just venturing into Latin clubs and hanging out. I got the best of rock, the best of jazz, the best of Latin music growing up in the suburbs of New York.
It's not hyperbole to say th there was the electric guitar before you and the electric guitar after you. You were whether or not you wanna take on this compliment, I'll say that you have had a hell of an influence on electric guitar, and the thing you did a lot of things that nobody did before you, and still to this day. I mean, I think, your compositions, I mean, you compose and all that. But I saw you in Atlanta a few years back. You were at the Variety Playhouse.
Huh.
Yeah, and, I mean, you had, like, sheet music across the front of the stage, like 6 pages. I don't know how wide it was, but I mean, you were playing your compositions. These were true compositions with movements,
Right.
and this was shit you really had to pay attention to, and you had to play it right, and the band was rehearsed, and, like, there was no, I mean, this was real, honest to God, classical music, if you will, with these instruments. I mean, it was pretty phenomenal, and I had never seen that before either, which was pretty
Yeah,
amazing.
well, there's a lot of substance to the compositions, and they tell a story, because there's so many different movements going on and everything. So if you don't have the ability to read, it's really hard to retain it all. I see a lot of guys today that have tremendous technique and all these, wicked kind of like hammer on the fretboard styles, but I never really hear what they're doing within a composition. They're just
Right.
showing off their technique, and how they're going to apply it is the main thing. So I think I had a really good start with Return to Forever. I was really, at the time, I considered Chick and Stanley and Lenny, they were already legends,
Mhm.
when I joined the band. So it was sink or swim for me. I God passed me the football, but boy, let me tell you, I was I really had to either grow fast or I'm not going to be able to handle it. And there was a time when I thought I just can't handle it. It was just too much. But then I got past that point and discovered I had the ability to write, but really I didn't want to take on that responsibility. But Chick, God bless Chick, he wanted us to contribute our own compositions. And I would have rather just played his stuff, but he pushed us to compose. So I had to figure out if I could compose, and I think the influence of all of the initial parts of being with the band, really inspired me to become a composer. He said that if you can improvise, then you can compose, and
Right.
a lot of those classical guys from hundreds of years ago that composed, that they were actually great improvisers, or else they wouldn't have been able to compose it.
Yeah, that what's happened to classical music in the last century is, that's a whole other, that's a big topic, where
Well,
it's
they need help. They need help. They should really, yeah. What's going to happen once whatever generation's listening to it now leaves us, and the kids now that listen to whatever they listen to, are they going to also be filling up those theaters,
yeah.
listening to Brahms? It's highly doubtful.
And the other thing that's interesting, there's only 2 guys that I think can think of on the planet that are as highly refined and respected for their acoustic playing as well as their electric playing, and that's you and John McLaughlin, stablemates, if you will.
Well,
Uh,
John, when I was a teenager, I went to see John as what the first version of Mahavishnu, and he did a little. Maybe it was even just one song, with an ovation guitar, acoustically, and it definitely made an impact. But then Return to Forever, as soon as I joined the band, Chick wanted to do an acoustic set, and I was like, "Oh God, acoustic! Oh man, how am I gonna do? What am I gonna do with that?" So I was just kind of forced into coming up with stuff. And I'll never forget, I think it was maybe even my first gig with the band. I played an Ovation steel string, and in that little 15-minute spot that I had, I just came up with stuff. And then at one moment, I just did a lick from the Allman Brothers, from Midnight Rider. And the whole place exploded into applause. When I left the stage after that, chick pulls me over. He said, "What the hell was that? What did you just play? How did you get the audience to do that?" I said, "Well, I played a little piece of, from a song from the Allman Brothers. Who are they?" He goes, "Who are the Allman Brothers?" He had no clue of any of this stuff. And all it took was,
Yeah, right.
and it connects with people.
Do you ever throw that in today?
I don't think it's as popular today as it was
Uh,
in that current time.
I live in Atlanta, Georgia. Trust me, it is.
Okay, hey, right, you're right. You're from there. I'm gonna do that.
That must have blown a bunch of people's minds when you did that.
I blew Chicks and Stanley and Lenny's mind. Like, what the hell did he just do to get the biggest? I got the biggest reception of doing next to nothing. All the hard stuff didn't matter. It was just.
Well, that's playing, cool shit. I mean, good melodies and stuff like that. Like the Beatles stuff that you did. I mean,
Beatles. Love them.
Yeah, people that
Yeah,
don't.
I'll include a couple of Beatles pieces. My way, of course, in the show.
Yeah, well, you're doing. I know you. Strawberry Fields is a big one.
Yeah.
Norwegian Wood is a
Right.
big one. I love what you're doing with that. Those are great freaking melodies. And
Oh, amazing melody.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you do that, man. I'm so glad. I have that record, and I'm so glad you did that. I really am,
Well,
because
now there's two.
I'm going to apologize. I didn't know there was two. I knew there was one because I have that one. But
Yeah, the Norwegian Wood's on the latest one. So is
that's the one
Strawberry
I have.
Fields. Okay, the first one, I think I like it even more, but it was done at Abbey Road.
So what was it like, when you first came on with Chick, and you're playing electric guitar? I mean, we're talking Les Paul, Marshalls, if I'm not mistaken. Was he used to that kind of volume?
It was the weirdest thing on the planet. Oh my God.
It had to be. I mean, I don't know if anybody's ever asked you that question before, but
Uh,
man.
I mean, it went from super loud to ridiculous soft. Chick was a Scientologist, and he would just constantly use some kind of Scientology philosophy on every decision he made, and that was very very strange, I must admit. And so he would read Scientology policy on every little thing. We'd have meetings, at least two or three. We have to have another meeting. Chick's calling another meeting. It's, oh no, not again. Anyway, I remember that he had a problem with volume and how to control the band. And I remember how extreme we would go, because music was really written for the guitar to be the forefront instrument. Like I was the lead singer
Yeah,
almost.
absolutely.
It's the way he wrote the music. He loved the sustain and all of that kind of stuff. But I told him, in order to get that, you can't play on one. You got to push the amp. So there were times when he'd do some crazy stuff, like he said, "You know what? I have a cognition. I really think, and he'd follow some kind of Scientology verbiage that would kind of give him some credit to what he was trying to say." And it was like, we'd all kind of like, oh God. So there was this one time, the second time we played Carnegie Hall, I remember he said, "We're going to let the PA carry the volume, and we're just going to give them like this much." So I think my Marshall cranked on like half, not half full volume, like not even up to one.
Right, I got it. Yeah.
like just a tiny blip coming
Point
out of the
point
amp.
five.
Oh my God. There was no sustain. The most sustain I had was bip. That was it.
Yeah.
Bip,
And you're doing that with palm muting already, so you didn't need that.
no. And
Yeah.
it was really torturous. So he wanted his feeling was, let's let the PA push the volume,
Yeah.
and then we'll make the volume on say super comfortable.
Well, that had to be a challenge. Trying to explain how electric guitars get that sound to
He
someone
had
that's
no
not
clue. I
hip to
mean,
it.
Chick had no clue about sound.
Yeah.
Chick had Chick was the most amazing player, improviser, composer. The one thing he lacked was knowing how to make a great sound with great production, and the business side too wasn't very good at that at all, because we really, that band was so adored, and we could have made, should have made another minimum 5 more records after Romantic Warrior. Romantic Warrior is still a record people talk about to this day, and yeah, it was groundbreaking. I mean, and imagine if we, followed that up with 5 more records with 3 years in between or whatever.
Yeah.
It could have been just, we could have been an arena act. He didn't realize, Chick, that he had like the Beatles of fusion.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very well put.
Yeah. He didn't realize that. And we had just signed a multi-million-dollar contract with CBS before it became Sony. And man, it was like a big deal for, I think it was like either 4 or 6 records. After that Romantic Warrior record, he wanted to hand the contract back because he thought the band was getting too big, which was what he wanted in the first place. He wanted to play big places, but I think what he saw was he was losing control. But it was something that he pushed for. He pushed for
Right.
each one of us to be solo artists in our own right and have
Right.
our own record deals and write music. So he was pushing for us to have this status and power. But then once we got it, he couldn't handle it. He started feeling like he's losing his leadership, which I can't say he was justified in his thinking, because we always respected him as the leader. It was true that we were all getting popular in our own right.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, everybody knew who is kind of like, when they started Led Zeppelin. I mean, they brought together 4 guys that were like, the guys, and they put them together
Yeah.
on the same stage. And you guys had that same thing. I mean, Stanley was, I mean,
Yeah, Stanley was like the Hendrix of the bass.
absolutely. I mean, there was him and everybody else, and then Lenny, what he was doing. I mean, people didn't pay attention. I don't think like the rock guitar guys, didn't pay attention to drummers quite as much until that guy started, doing what he was doing. And then your thing, you're being the lead singer. Your voice was the dominant voice, if you will. And yeah, you guys were known individually as well as the band was known collectively.
One thing that I took note of back then, when we're talking 76, was realizing that we were the only band in the world that had a group contract and each guy had a solo contract.
And deservedly so. And then I'm gonna move forward on you a little bit. And then like 1981, Friday Night in San Francisco.
Yeah. Well, that
What?
was recorded in 1980 in December.
Yeah, it came out
And
81.
and that really, man, that record sold something like 7 million records around the world. So that kind of opened up a door that where I could see my future. I could see that, particularly in Europe, they were very much receptive, in a big way, of acoustic music, because a lot of the halls we played, even when we played electric, when we played electric in those halls, they weren't suited for that loud. Like drums in some of those beautiful acoustic halls were too loud, in particular. So putting Papa was already making a name in Europe. John was very well known, and I was like the new kind of hot gun at the moment. So the combination, I knew it was going to be, quite a popular tour, and it was. So we recorded almost all the shows professionally, with a truck and
Is
reel to reel machines.
yeah.
And then that 2 month tour ended us up in San Francisco, and those were the best shows, I thought. Now we got both nights out, Friday and Saturday.
The opening of Mediterranean Sundance is as iconic as frickin' Purple Haze or Foxy Lady or Whole Lot of Love or any song out there. I mean, that that opening figure that you got, it's like, I mean, it makes the hair on your back of your neck go up. I mean, it's such a freaking iconic thing, man.
Everyone knows it, around the world.
And it's a rite of passage for guitar players too. There's a lot of guitar players that that you got to learn, you got to know that, or you're not cool. So that had to be quite something. What you got, Paco on left, stage right, and you got John on the opposite side. They're both wearing white blousey shirts with black vests.
Mm-hmm.
And you got this kid from New York, New Jersey, with you look like you got a black t-shirt on, man. It was just so freaking awesome to see that going on, because you got these two, European, if you will, powerhouses, and then you got you right there in the middle and musically directing traffic with all this rhythmic thing.
Well, John was actually in the first tour. He was in the middle in the first tour, and then I think when we got back together, did a reunion tour.
That's what I saw.
I was in the middle. Paco and my rhythm together fit like this. It was just amazing. Whenever John soloed, he had the best rhythm section to play against, because Paco and I had a really good sense of a certain thing in Latin music called the claves. We really understood the upbeats and the syncopation, and without slamming the downbeats all the time. So we could play all these kind of really hip rhythms that were totally locked in terms of, the downbeat was assumed.
All those years ago, and that stuff holds up like it was done yesterday.
Wow.
It's
really cool.
It does. It just does. I mean, in fact, I listened to it again this morning, and I went, Jesus Christmas.
Yeah, I know. We listen to it now. We go, holy shit, we can't do that anymore. Like, not like that.
I mean, it is like, it was like you guys were like, that's as tight as it can be without electronically doubling it. I mean,
I think there's something that can be said about the energy that you have in your 20s. I mean, look what the Beatles did. Look what they produced
yeah.
in the when they were in their 20s during the 1960s. It's far better than anything they did after that.
Well, that's that there is a whole study of that, the creative arc, if you will. I'm sure you're probably hip to that, and that typically is the truth. That's when most artists do great work.
It was just the creative output was the quantity and the quality and the proficiency and the velocity and all of that stuff was at a height. But then after that, I had a little frustration with the trio because everything was super fast, and I think that's what John liked. John liked everything like super fast, and so it became, in the beginning, it was a very healthy kind of competition because we were playing for one another,
right?
And the audience got the benefit of watching us, almost compete in a way, because one guy would take a solo and we're watching that solo and going, holy Jesus, was that great. Okay, and then now it's my turn. Oh shoot, I got to come up with some stuff, not what I usually play, but I got to go beyond it. So that was the plus and positive side of that whole experience with them. But as a composer, I really had I had heard this whole other thing, and that's what I put a lot of attention on for the 20 or some 30 years after that kind of maturity thing that just evolved and continues to evolve. But I know that I have to get back to some of the more popular things of that era, because that's what people are most familiar with.
Well, you're kind of leaning into my next segment, if you will, and that is you're on tour.
Yeah.
I think you're in Miami now. Is that not correct?
Yeah, well, I have a place here, but
Oh,
I just happen to be starting here too.
and then you're coming to Atlanta, and then I mean, the tour is, if you want to check it out, just go to Alf D. Meola's website, and you will see the tour. All you got to do is go to Google Al Di Meola tour, and it's like 30 sites will tell you where you're going to be and when you're going to be there. So here's the big question: what are people going to see or see and hear in Atlanta on the 27th of this month?
Well, they're going to hear me debut a lot of new music that I had written during the COVID years. They're going to hear some Piazzolla. They're going to hear some of my renditions of the Beatles. They're going to hear some mid-period music, and then I'm going to end the show with something that Mediterranean Sundance, which I
Right.
normally do. But it's going to be like myself and an acoustic guitar player from Sardinia, who I've been playing with a lot, mostly in Europe. Peo Alfonsi is his name. And then I have a tabla player that's joining us, Amit Kavlikar. He's probably the greatest virtuoso on the instrument of the young generation. And
Wow.
then I have an amazing Spanish percussionist who's specializing in the cajon and some varied percussion. And so we have flanking us. We have the two the percussionists and then two guitar players in the center.
So it's gonna be a four piece. Is that where you're
This
going
be
with?
a four piece acoustical.
That'll be awesome. I mean, your use of rhythm is, just phenomenal. Actually, I mean, you get it all going. You get shoulders going and wrists going and head going, and you play with your whole body. Your technique. I mean, you do a lot of counterpunctual stuff. I mean, you're doing all kinds of shit. Al, who the hell do you think you are, LD Meola? I mean, Jesus, what's going
Yeah,
on?
counterpoint is very important. So
Oh yeah,
we have all individual parts that are very
yeah.
worked out. And every one of these sound checks is really a brutal rehearsal.
Wow.
Because it's now we're getting back together after being off for 2 months, and for sure they're not going to remember all of the fine points that we worked hard on the last tour. So the first, I would say, 5 shows are always like intense rehearsals. In fact, Atlanta will be our first rehearsal sound check because the Miami show is just myself and Peo Alfonsi. It's just a duet, and then the percussionist will join us in Atlanta.
Very cool. I'm planning on being there and checking it all out. There's a guy here in Atlanta who he's a bluegrass flamenco gypsy jazz guy. His name is Curtis Jones. Curtis is a huge fan of yours. I asked him. I said, "Well, Curtis, what would you have me ask Al?" And you know what he asked? He said, "How does he keep his hands in shape?"
Uh, the hands are going through some physical changes, and it's an age thing, and bones start shifting, and certain things start happening. So rather than go through surgery on them, I uh, I just gave them a big rest these last 2 months. So I'm just starting up play again to see if I can get back to the level that I was known for. But
Right.
yeah, there's certain things that, boy, don't seem the same in terms of velocity. But I have to see if it's just the fact that I had back in the day I had 5 to 6 more hours of practice every day than I do now because of these damn phones and
Yeah.
computers.
Yeah.
So and I think that is a major factor in not only just more practice time but focus. The focus we had on our music was so much greater. Before the phones became an issue where you're checking something out and then you go to some other thing and then You
Right.
forget what you were looking for, and then oh, let's see who's contacting me on Facebook. Okay, let's go to my messages. Oh my God, and you're so busy with the variety of different things you have to answer, or you get caught up in stories, or then you feel compelled to write to a bunch of people. So all of that's kind of taken 5 to 6 hours of everybody's day
Out of your day.
away from what they might have spent, like in our case, on music.
This is a question I've asked a few people, but if you had all the budget in the world and you could get anybody that you wanted to play, what would be your dream project?
Hmm. Wow. Well, I think the guys that I picked on my early records were super phenomenal. Like Steve Gadd, he's still
Oh,
around.
oh yeah.
He's playing easier music for a lot more money. you know, so I don't know if he's got those chops anymore. But I would probably get Keith Jarrett to play, even though he can only play with his right hand, he can play just as good as most people, the best players with two hands. That's for sure. But I would also be hiring more orchestral players, or like chamber orchestras, like I am on the new record. Instead of going to East Europe, I'd probably get the London Symphony, the most expensive. And just do it up.
That would be pretty hip. What would you like people to know that I haven't asked you?
Oh, I don't know. Geez. What do I know? Let's see.
Well, while you're thinking about that, Ovation guitars.
Yeah.
How did you
Well,
how did
I've
you do
kind of abandoned playing them for 20 years and went to a nylon, which is a much kind of a Spanish nylon that I've been favoring, but I kind of miss the Ovation too. So I'm going to be trying to incorporate both.
Yeah, I saw you playing on a track the other night. It looked like it was relatively recent with the black, your black Ovation signature model. But a night in San Francisco, Friday night in San Francisco was made with an Ovation guitar.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I saw you playing the black guitar. I hadn't seen you play an Ovation in quite some time, and then I saw this video that's out there of you playing on it, and I thought, oh, I wonder if he's bringing that whole thing back
Yeah,
out.
we're gonna bring it. We're gonna bring it. I may even incorporate a full body Ovation. There's a video on Facebook where I'm playing this dark brown top. It's a real old one, so it's from the '70s, and
Those are the best.
the sound was quite extraordinary,
You
actually.
know, Tony Rice recorded Manzanita with an Ovation. A lot of people don't know that. Bluegrass.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Tony Rice. Well, what the guitar definitely was not for everyone.
No.
This is if you want to do like a country song or some kind of sing along song in the way that James Taylor or any of the country players. I understand. You go right for the Martin, the old Martin, or a
Right.
Guild or something. But the way that I play, the the Ovation was just set up better. And
Yeah.
when you play in the high register on an Ovation, you get a way better sound that's has more meat to it
Right.
than if you were to play a Martin or a Guild, which sound great down low when you play those big
Right.
open chords,
Right.
but it's not made to play in the high register because it sounds very thin.
Any other questions I would ask you would be questions you've answered like 80 million times before. And I don't want to be that guy either.
Yeah, that's all right.
So, so if you were to tell somebody theoretically what it is that what it is that what encapsulates the LD Meola style, how would you describe the things? I mean, is there a type? Are there scales that you particularly lean towards? Are there rhythms that you lean? I mean,
I really am. My my first love was drums and percussion.
Right.
And I wind up doing all of my percussion on my records myself. I just hear, and I've practiced rhythm all of my high school years. Pretty much wasn't paying attention too much to what the class was about, but I was always under under the desk. I was tapping quarter notes with my foot softly, and
Right.
on top of the desk, I would just basically play rhythm. And none of that would make sense unless this was happening with my foot under the desk. So I'm playing all of this against this. You can't hear the foot, but it's down there.
Yeah.
It's down there. I'm always tapping quarter notes. So I'm always playing against the quarter notes. So if the quarter note's doing this, now all of that gets my idea when I was in high school. Go figure why I would ever think such a thing. I don't know where it came from. But
Yeah.
I thought that if I do this constantly and I develop my rhythm, I can carry it over into my guitar playing.
Well,
And
it worked.
and it really did work. And rhythm is something, and this kind of playing against the time or against the clave is something that you can just, if you have the ability to do it, you can develop it. Or if you don't have that in you, then you can't do it. You're either born with it or you're not.
Right.
And so I found out that, I had that thing,
Right.
and probably it ignited from my times going to all those Latin clubs in New York, especially
Yeah.
at the Corso, where I was listening to Latin big bands, and just loving the Latin side of things. And so, in the Latin world, and I've covered it all. You have tango, which is a whole other thing. Brazilian rhythms are completely different than the island with the Caribbean rhythms, and then you have the whole Spanish flamenco influence. So I've taken from all of those idioms and know how to play with those rhythms. So I much prefer sometimes to play it as a percussionist.
In your style and watching you play, I mean, you truly incorporate percussion, melody, dynamics. I mean, obviously percussion, melody and harmony and all that kind of stuff. I mean, your integration is just second to none, and it's a pretty phenomenal thing. Well, listen, I'm gonna thank you for your time today, man.
My pleasure.
You're very generous with this, and this is no bullshit. You are one of the greats.
Thank you very much.
You
Thank you.
are. You're one of the greats, and you're going to go down. I mean, if you haven't already, you're going to go down as one of the guys that made a lot of difference and did new shit. And and you can credit Chick all you want, but I mean, you had to do it. I mean, the people that you played with, the music that you were involved with, the things that I mentioned, and in the beginning of the 5 or 6 different things that nobody did before you. I
Yeah.
mean, people are gonna, if they're not already hip to that, they're, when people start looking at, well, how did this happen? Well, L. Well, how'd this happen? Well, L. Well, how'd this happen? Well, L. I mean, you got a lot of shit to your credit, and I got to tell you, there's not many guys, there's not anybody I can think of that has that. You kick some major ass, and the people that, if you have naysayers at all, or anybody that, they just don't get it.
Yeah. Well.
There's a great quote. There's a great quote that a friend of mine, he attributes it to you. I don't know if you actually said it or not, but he said, people that get down on people that play fast can't play fast.
Right.
Well, whether or not you said that or not, I don't know. But anyway,
I said something about sometimes you get these guys going, oh, you could say much more with one note than a lot of notes, and I said, well, yeah, well, that's easy to say when you can't execute what's in your head, because there's nothing worse than you having a burst of inspiration, and then
can't
you
do it.
play something and it's sloppy as hell.
Yeah, you can't do it. Can't pull it
So
off.
try to convey that point to some of the best flamenco players. Man, it's all about technique. it's all about accuracy and speed, and
Right.
but saying something with it. And
That's
it's
the
not
difference.
only about, the music is not only fast playing, and that's why I put a lot of attention on composition and melody. Because I have a lot of melody in a lot of my
Oh,
compositions,
absolutely.
which is now almost 300 compositions. So like,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
it wasn't like a framework for me to play 500,000 miles an hour. It certainly wasn't. But yeah, there was, in the early years, there was maybe more of an emphasis on that one aspect. But it was always within the framework of a composition. And I credit Chick for that whole kind of thing. And the years before, going to see all those great shows at the Fillmore East and everything, and my teacher, was just all the right combination of influences.
So, all right, so we're going to end it up right now. So, Bob Bakert with Jazz Guitar Today with Al Di Meola. And man, I can't thank you enough. I really can't.
Thank you, man.
A
And I
real pleasure.
appreciate it. It was a joy.
See you in a couple of weeks. All right.
Okay, and Hotlanta.
On Hotlanta, man. Bye
Take
bye.
care, man. Bye
Bye.
bye.